Okay, that seems to be working now. Yeah, right. I hope you can hear me now, guys. I do apologize for the mess around there. Thank you, Joseph. Talking, you seem to be not hearing I am. Yes, I know, Yoda. Thank you. Well, it should be working now, I hope. And if it's not, let me just check. Yeah, I'm definitely getting audio through now. Okay, that seems to be working now. Yeah, so that's working. Hi guys, again, sorry about that. It's been a while. It's been a while. Okay, you could say it's been a long time. But anyway, sorry for that. I do apologise. Just monitoring the chats from my mobile device. So, does Star Trek Voyager take place in an alternate timeline? I think it does, and I have sufficient evidence to suggest it does. So, the first thing I'm going to do, I'm going to share a screen here. Just give me a second. Let me just bring up the first image. That's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. It's not the one I want. Share screen. Give me a second, guys. Give me a second. Okay, so Star Trek Voyager timeline. Now, I know what a lot of you are thinking. Well, it takes place at Deep Space, same time as Deep Space Nine and everything else, and TNG. But there are some major historical discrepancies that would suggest Voyager takes place in an alternate timeline. Okay, I'm going to get into that now. So, before we go any further, let's bring up a bit of history here, because we do like our history. That's the wrong one. That's the wrong one. That's not what I want. That's not what I want. This one. Okay, let's get rid of that. So, Khan Noonien Singh. Can you see that, guys? Oh, it's not working. 1 second. So, as we know historically, from the mid to late 20th century, the human race began genetically engineering human beings, which of course led to the eugenics wars. Now, one of the most iconic of these genetically engineered rulers was Khan Noonien Singh. Now, it's not certain whether or not he was genetically engineered by birth or genetically engineered later as an adult, and then began his rise in the early 90s. But by 1996, the genetically engineered supermen were pretty much ousted or sort of overrun by the rest of the human race. And Khan Noonien Singh and some of his, his cronies boarded a ship, the USS Botany Bay, and left. They went off into outer space. Yeah. Random Miller says now audio is now 5x5. That's fantastic. Glad you can hear me. So that's the first. So we're going to start there with Khan Noonien Singh. Now, Khan Noonien Singh was an extremely intelligent and dangerous superhuman. He was the most prominent of the genetically engineered augments of the late 20th century eugenics wars period on Earth. Khan was considered by the USS Enterprise command crew over 3 centuries later to have been the best of them, reappearing with a decade of augment followers in the 23rd century. Khan became a notorious enemy of James T. Kirk. Then we're going to move what came after that. Now, remember, his fall came in 1996, and the eugenics wars were pretty devastating. They included the whole world. But that wasn't the last war of the human race before first contact. All right. After that, we then had the post-atomic horror. Oh, sorry, no, we had the Third World War. In the shadow of this, World War III was from 2026 to 2053. It was the last of Earth's 3 world wars. The conflict involved nuclear cataclysm as well as genocide and eco-terrorism. The war started in 2026 over the issue of genetic manipulation and human genome enhancement, and lasted until approximately 2053. It resulted in the death of some 600 million humans. By the end of most of the major cities had been destroyed, and there were few governments left. Prior to the war in 1968, when a time-displaced Captain James T. Kirk was trying to reason on whether or not he should trust Gary 7 to stop a nuclear weapon, 7 warned Kirk that if he didn't allow 7 to stop the weapon, World War III would commence. Then TOS, that was in the TOS episode Assignment Earth. The eugenics wars of 1992 to 1992 in 1996, in which 37 million died, were also at times referred to as World War III. Okay, so we could say World War III was one long war, basically just broken up. Let's see. Oops, wrong one. Hello, Fluggerville. Good to see you. Glad you're popping by. We're just going through whether or not Voyager is in an alternate timeline. Okay. Then we had the post-atomic horror. The term post-atomic horror was used by the future Earth historians to refer to a global turmoil which resulted after the end of the Third World War in 2053. Because the war was a nuclear exchange, large populations of humans were bombed out of existence, and the survivors were placed in jeopardy by radioactivity, supply shortages, and the collapse of most major governments. In the mid-2050s, Colonel Philip Green ordered the euthanasia of hundreds of thousands of radiation sickness-stricken humans so they wouldn't pass on the mutations to future generations. Green outlined his rationale by speaking to a crowd about how they must reject the impure and cast out. Now, not much is known about this guy. The only there was, I think, one reference in the one reference in the original series, but there was another reference to this guy, and that was in Star Trek Enterprise in the second to last episode, which was called, I think, was Terra Firma. He was this, dictator that the guy who played RoboCop, can't remember his name now, that he looked up to, and that was Colonel Philip Green. However, the horror would still prevail for some years to come. When the news of the event reached Vulcan, the Vulcans, including Valar, were fascinated by humanity, but also worried, believing the idea of humans had deemed themselves ready to join interstellar communities so soon after the war seemed premature, and he wasn't wrong. But not soon after the events of the post-atomic horror. Mountains of Elysium, good to see you. And Fluggerverse says, hello, Mountains of Elysium. Yeah, it's good. How you doing? Glad to see you guys. Now we're going to go from there. Oh, wrong one. To here. Let that load up. It's not loading up. Do excuse me, guys. It's been a long time since I've done one of these. Why is it not working now? It's broken. I broke it. What have I done? I've broken it. Ah, crap. I'll just get on with it. If it loads, it loads. It doesn't. But I'm going to get on with it. Just 1 second, guys. I'm going to go back to here. I'm just going to bring me back up because I'm handsome. Because I'm a handsome devil. So not long after that, by April 4th, 2063, a major event happened. Zefram Cochrane built the first warp ship called the Phoenix and set off. Off he went and made first contact with the Vulcans. This, of course, led to Earth uniting and becoming obviously United Earth, which then, over a century later, led to the creation of the United Federation of Planets, allowing fleets of starships to be built and mankind could start exploring the galaxy. Of course, the first of which was we had the NX Enterprise, then the NCC 1701 Enterprise, and then carried on to the Enterprise D, DS9, and then the USS Voyager. Let's see if this is working yet, my Google Drive. No, it's crashed. What can I say? It's crashed. Let's see if I can bring it up again. 1 second. Yeah. See if it'll work now. 1 second. Give it a minute. Anyway, so yes, the USS Voyager. Matt Zelisa says, hope you're doing okay, Coach. I'm doing fine. I'm a bit rusty on the old live streaming here. I'm having a few issues, as you could say. First, my microphone didn't work, and then now I'm having problems bringing up images. So, yeah, that's, what do you expect? But, hey, that's life. Such is life. Fuggerville, oh, yeah. So, yeah, I'm doing good, Matt Zelisa. I'm glad you, and I hope you're all doing well as well. Why is that volume? Sorry, I need to turn my volume down. So, let's just see if that's ready to rock and roll. It is ready to rock and roll. Look at that. I can share this again. All right, cool. I'm going to bring up share screen again. 1 second. Share screen. Da-da-da. And USS Voyager. Okay, I hope you can see that, guys. Okay, so the USS Voyager was constructed at the Utopia Planitia Fleet Yards orbiting Mars and was launched from Earth Stin 035.5 in 2371. That was shown also in the Voyager episode Relativity. Number of technical innovations that have become available by the 2370s: binaural circuitry, variable geometry warp cells, and emergency medical holographic programs, and all the other bells and whistles. Shortly before, as we know, the USS Voyager was set off from Deep Space Nine into the Badlands in pursuit of a Marquis ship carrying Chakotay, B'Elanna, and of course her first officer, Tuvok. Her second, well, not her first officer, sorry, her chief of security, Lieutenant Commander Tuvok. And I'm showing you the wrong image here, aren't I? I've done it again. Da-da-da-da-do. I'm an idiot. I'll try that again. Look at that. It's been some time. There we go. USS Voyager. So that's set off, in chase of a Marquis ship into the Badlands. And obviously it got hit. It got hit by some sort of spatial anomaly created by the caretaker, and was sent to the Delta Quadrant, or pulled to the Delta Quadrant, depending on how you look at it. And it's from that point then things begin to look different. Right? And with that, I mean, in the Star Trek Voyager episode, Future's End. So the Star Trek Voyager episode, Future's End. It sees Captain Braxton come back in time in the time ship Aeon, where he sets upon the USS Voyager, believing that the Voyager will create some form of some sort of temporal problem, and destroys the 29th and causes an explosion in the 29th century, destroying all of humanity. So he goes back in time, believing he has to destroy the USS Voyager. However, Voyager fights back, and both the Aeon and the USS Voyager sent back to the 20th century. However, the USS Aeon and Braxton are sent further back in time than the USS Voyager, creating a new separate timeline. How, or at least we think. Okay, because as I said before, the human race began genetically engineering the human race in the 1950s. However, this guy went and only landed back in in late 1960s, 1970s. Let me go back to that 1 second. It was. Yeah, just actually say when it landed. I think it was in the 1970s. So in 1969. That's what it was. Yeah. So the both ships got sent back. So the time ship Aeon got sent back to 1969, and as it did so, Captain Braxton did an emergency beam out, and the ship crashed in the vicinity of, I think it was the Yosemite Park, which was stumbled upon was stumbled upon, of course, by none other than Henry Sterling, the owner and founder of ChronoWorks. That's right. So let's look at. So from there, and then it was in, which became the ChronoWorks was at the height of its. I was to say, at the height of its business, come by the mid-90s, which was roughly the year this was in 1996 when Voyager came back to the 20th century, and this was roughly the time where the human race rose up against the augments like Khan Union Singh, and either killed them or sent them packing. Now, in this episode, this is the first episode where there was no evidence of the eugenics wars whatsoever. In fact, everything looked quite hunky-dory in that episode in America and in the rest of the world. As we saw Neelix also on Neelix and Kez on the ship monitoring television signals, there was no indication of the eugenics wars, Khan Union Singh, the cities that have been wiped out. None of it had happened. Now, maybe by the time ship Aeon going back further, and it being discovered in 1969 by Henry Sterling and him starting ChronoWorks, basing all of his technology on the 29th century ship, that maybe that prevented it from happening. I don't know, but either way, a new timeline had occurred. But this isn't the only episode where there was evidence of temporal manipulation or the timeline being altered, which we'll get into that in a moment, because I'm just going to take a quick swig of drink. Cinnabon Bunny says Voyager is on the best timeline. Voyager is on the best timeline. It seems that Voyager didn't have any of this dark history that DS9 and TNG and the original series had, or even Enterprise. Okay, it seems Voyager stands on its own. Now, that's not to say certain things didn't happen, and the same events couldn't have taken place just because the Third World War didn't happen or the eugenics wars didn't happen. Doesn't mean Zefram Cochrane couldn't have built his warp ship and set off and made first contact with the Vulcans. You never know. These things could still have happened, just under different circumstances. Okay. However, that was then rectified by ChronoWorks being destroyed, Henry Sterling going off attempted to go to the future in the time ship Aeon and was destroyed in the process. Thus, Captain Braxton coming back to the 20th century to bring Voyager back to the 24th century into the Delta Quadrant. However, again, there was no indication that any of this had been erased from history. Rather, ChronoWorks had just ended on that day, and Henry Sterling was never seen or heard from ever again. And that's just the way it was. Now, the next bit of evidence I'm going to go in was another episode which featured something called the Millennium Gate. This was another Voyager episode where Janeway talks about her ancestor. Cinnabon Bunny says, Mountains says, greetings, Cinnabon Bunny. And Cinnabon Bunny says, hello, mountains. Yeah, good to see you all having fun in the chat there. So, as I said, the Millennium Gate. Now, this was from the... I can't remember the name of the episode now. I think it might be called Millennium Gate. What does it say? Oh, no, it was from the Voyager episode called 1159. So Catherine Janeway recounts the history of her ancestor called Shannon O'Donnell, who ended up marrying a man called Henry Janeway. And she was, by all accounts, an engineer who worked on a project called the Millennium Gate. We see them here together. One second. Here we see Henry Janeway and Shannon O'Donnell. That's them together. Henry Janeway ran a library or a bookshop, and he didn't want. And the only thing that was stopping the Millennium Gate from being built was his stubbornness to give up the shop. And this took place. Hold on. And this took place in 2012. Again, there was no evidence for the fact that they could build such giant buildings like the Millennium Gate which was a self-sustaining environment, a self-sustained biosphere with its own ecosystem, as well as over 600 stores. Eventually, the Millennium Gate would serve as a model for the first colony on Mars. Now, again, the human race wasn't even thinking about going into outer space or building such large structures as this, as there had been so much devastation, like eugenics wars leading to the Third World War, of course, and post-atomic horror. So at this point, the world was not in any, or at least as we in the TOS, TNG, and DS9 timeline, this wasn't possible. So, because about this time we had things like the Bell Riot, or no, I think the Bell Riots came about 10 years later. But as I said, the state of affairs of Earth, at least in Star Trek, was not in any condition to build these giant spires like the Millennium Gate. So this is another bit of evidence that suggests to me Voyager is on a completely different timeline. It doesn't share the same timeline with the rest of Star Trek. But there was another one, was called another Voyager episode called One Small Step. Let's have a look. Where was it? On October 19th, 2032, the Sol System. One of humanity's early missions to Mars. Again, there weren't any missions to Mars during this period because Third World War. So one of humanity's early missions to Mars is in progress. The command module designated Ares 4, controlled by Lieutenant John Kelly, orbits Mars while two astronauts, Rose Kumagawa and Andrei Novakovich, explore the surface. They discuss the mission with Kelly as well as banter with him about baseball, specifically the World Series. Yeah, now if you've got things, like the World Series going on, baseball and global sports events, clearly, either these wars were either overhyped in the history books in Star Trek, or, in my opinion, this is in another timeline. However, the Ares 4 was then encapsulated by a spatial anomaly and was then discovered 300 years later in the Delta Quadrant by the USS Voyager. In fact, you can see Commander John Kelly here. 1 second. Was this guy. You may remember him. You may not. If it loads. It was this guy, Commander John Kelly, on his own little thing. Mountains of Listen says, I think plotting in the warp core caused the episode to unfold as required by the story. I really like the Millennium Gate episode. I think it was called 1159. You are right. Yeah, 1159. I had to correct myself there better before. Yeah, still, I mean, the original series talked about the eugenics wars. We talked about the Third World War in Star Trek First Contact. And DS9 talked about the eugenics wars over and over again when the Julian Bashir being genetically engineered, and then he brings another genetically engineered people, and it was constantly brought up. And obviously the courtroom in the Star Trek Next Generation pilot that Q brings him in, as well as in the TNG finale, All Good Things. That was obviously a court in the time of the post-atomic horror. So there was a long from the 90s, pretty much all the way to the day of first contact. Earth's history was pretty bloody and full of war and death. So things like the Millennium Gate, Chrono Works, Mars, and Mars missions just would not have been possible during that time period, because the world was so concentrated on war, and essentially new wars were starting, others trying to end them, and it was just one war after another. So I don't think there would have been much, either much funding or much manpower to be able to do these things, and there certainly was no evidence of them in these episodes. And that's why I believe firmly that Star Trek Voyager is on a completely different timeline than to the rest of than the rest of the Star Trek universe. In the end, it's just the way. That's just how I feel about it. Yeah. So but what are your thoughts? I mean, do you think Voyager is on another timeline to the rest of Star Trek? Or would you say these things could have taken place at the same time? Was America? I mean, because America wasn't the United States was not excluded from the Third World War or the eugenics wars. They were in the war that they took a large role in these wars. So it makes you wonder how they were able to do the world or Earth was able to do all this stuff while having these big major wars on. Eugenics war, Third World War. Then you had essentially another dark age called the post-atomic horror until, of course, First Contact. Mm-hmm. And then then people like Colonel Green going around getting rid of the humans that have been mutated by the nuclear holocaust. Saying that only the pure should survive. I just don't see any of that happening as Voyager recounts it. As the history in Voyager, the history in Voyager is shown. I personally think it's on a completely different timeline. It's maybe here's one timeline that we know: TNG, TOS, DS9, and then Voyager's like right next to it. That's not to say that this timeline doesn't have a Voyager. It's just that the Voyager we saw on television is in the timeline just offset from it ever so slightly, or it offset the timeline in the episode Future's End. Who knows? You never know. Cinema Bunny says it was Ohio. No one wants Ohio. At the same time, it was retconned that eugenic wars took place only in Asia. Was it? I don't remember seeing that. Certainly not on screen. Maybe a Memory Alpha, but I said Memory Alpha does get stuff wrong, but I don't remember ever that being mentioned on television. Unless I missed an episode. It says the other two stories took place before the Third World War. Yes, but still, I don't think the eugenics wars was only in Asia. I just don't. Star Trek Universe is a multiverse, so I count Voyager as different. Enterprise is different. Discovery is definitely different. Has very little context. Still Trek, but different. Oh, yeah, I'm not saying it's not Star Trek. I'm just posing the question: does it take place in a different timeline? Was never mentioned on TV. Then it isn't canon. I'm afraid, Joseph. You know the rules. If it's not on a movie or a TV show, it isn't canon. Yeah, it's the way it is. I have to play. I don't make the rules. I just abide by them. I wish I did make the rules because then I'd make everything canon. But unfortunately, it's not, sadly. But yeah, and that is pretty much that, I think. Yeah, so what time are we on now? Wow, it's been over 30 minutes. That's cool. Well, I think that is pretty much all I have to talk about today. But I personally feel that Voyager takes place in an alternate timeline from TNG and DS9. And, anyone who wants to argue that, well, feel free to get me on Twitter because the stream's about to end. Let's see who we've got here. I do not disagree. Okay, cool. Who else we got here? Double negative. Double negative. Yes, well, I did not do that. Oh, no, that's not double negative. I did not do that. I didn't not do that. There's a double negative. Well, guys, thank you for coming. Thank you for coming over and watching me ramble on about how Voyager's in an alternate timeline. And I hope you had fun. I know I did. And I enjoyed talking about Voyager. And I enjoyed talking to you guys. So thank you for coming. And I'll hopefully do another live stream day after tomorrow. Okay. So see you all then. Live long and prosper, and good night. And I'll see you all next time. In the continuation.